Hello everybody and welcome back to What's the Word. Today is Friday, January 15th, 2021. And today the word comes from Psalms 37, verse 5, which reads, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass." I think the best way to explain that is by looking at 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17 out of the Message Bible, which reads, "Don't love the world's ways, don't love the world's goods. Love of the world squeezes out love for the Father. Practically everything that goes on in the world, wanting your own way, wanting everything for yourself, wanting to appear important, has nothing to do with the Father. It just isolates you from him. The world in all its wanting is on the way out. But whoever does what God wants is set for eternity." Moving on to scoreboard watching and starting with college basketball. Maryland's scheduled game for tomorrow against Nebraska was postponed due to COVID issues within Nebraska's program. So, in order to maintain a rhythm, Maryland scheduled Wingate with that game happening today at noon. And by the time I release this, it'll probably already be underway. But don't expect Maryland to lose that game, although they shall most likely be without their leading scorer, Eric Ayala, who is still nursing that groin injury. Their next regularly scheduled game will be on Tuesday at number 7 Michigan, with the time still to be determined. Georgetown has also ran into scheduling issues due to a COVID outbreak within their program. Their game scheduled for this past Wednesday the 13th against DePaul was postponed, as well as their upcoming games against Providence and Marquette also being postponed. Their next regularly scheduled game will be on Tuesday the 26th of January at Xavier, with the time still to be determined. For the Washington Wizards, they have also ran into a COVID outbreak, but before that happened, they were able to get their game in Monday, which they won against the Phoenix Suns 128-107. Russell Westbrook was out dealing with that left quad injury that we now learned he suffered originally during training camp and most recently aggravated. I pretty much suspected this from the beginning of the season. Russ didn't look to have the same bounce that he usually does. He hasn't even had a single dunk all season. But for the game itself, Bradley Beal did return from his COVID protocols to drop 34 points, 9 assists, and 8 rebounds in 35 minutes of play. This is exactly what I've been looking for out of Brad, his facilitator mode. He had 7 assists in the first quarter, and as a guy who can get scoring going anytime he wants, it's better for him to get his teammates involved early, and he did just that with 9 assists in the game and only turning the ball over once. He did play 35 minutes, not leaving until the 3-minute and 17-minute marker in the game, which Scott Brooks did take some heat for since Washington was up so large in this game. But, anything to get the win, especially with the way the Wizards have been struggling. Bradley Beal's night included this ridiculous up and under, which takes a lot of core strength. Watch it from another angle. Filling in for Thomas Bryant, who suffered that torn ACL, was Robin Lopez and Mo Wagner, who defensively held DeAndre Ayton to just 8 points on the game. They also combined for 20 points and 17 rebounds, as Robin Lopez had his first double-double of the season with 11 points and 11 rebounds, and Mo Wagner had 9 points and 6 rebounds, as well as this really headsy play, which Anthony Gill emulated in the closing minutes of the game. For Davis Bertons, he looked like he was back on track, going for 18 points on 6 of 9 three-point shooting, including going 5 of 6 in the second quarter. To me, it was a really impressive win for Washington. They held the 9th-ranked three-point shooting team to just 14%, as the Suns went 4 of 27 from beyond the arc. Washington never trailed in this game, leading by as much as 32 points, and they only turned the ball over 8 times, with a few of those coming in garbage time. For Washington, they can score with the best of them. They're second in the league in points per game with 120.5 per game, but they've been allowing 121.3 points per game, which is worst in the association. So to hold Phoenix, which is a really good three-point shooting team, to just 107 points is pretty good for them. The only thing that I didn't like is that they shot 60% from the free throw line, only going 17 of 28 from the floor. But as I mentioned, after this game, the Washington Wizards had an outbreak of COVID, which led to their games on this past Wednesday against the Jazz being postponed, as well as their game scheduled for today against the Pistons being postponed. Washington now has up to 5 players who have tested positive for COVID. We know that Mo Wagner and Rui Hachimura tested positive, and I suspect that Bradley Beal is one of those players as well, as even though he played against Phoenix, he came in contact with Jason Tatum, who tested positive, and we know that COVID takes at least 3 to 4 days to show a positive test, and sometimes up to a week, so I suspect that Brad was one of those players who tested positive. For those who have been following the Wizards, this isn't much of a surprise though, as 5 of their last 6 opponents have all had a player to test positive for COVID. Dating back to New Year's Eve when the Chicago Bulls had 4 players out due to health and safety protocols, and we know that one of those players who was positive was Tomas Satoransky, a former Washington Wizard. They didn't have anybody against the Minnesota Timberwolves test positive, but then starts the streak of consecutive games with a player from the opposite team testing positive the day after facing the Wizards. After playing the Philadelphia 76ers, Seth Curry tested positive. Then after playing the Miami Heat, Avery Bradley was placed into health and safety protocols. The Miami Heat have since had 7 players added to that list. Then the Wizards came up against the Boston Celtics, who had Jason Tatum test positive. And now, of course, the Washington Wizards have an outbreak within their organization. Washington's next 2 regularly scheduled games come against the Cleveland Cavaliers Sunday and Monday, but don't expect those 2 to happen since Washington doesn't have the 8 required players to play this game.
But hey, as they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Wednesday marked the return of the National Hockey League. And for the Washington Capitals, their season got underway last night as they defeated the Buffalo Sabres 6-4, marking head coach Peter Laviolette's first win with his new team. The story of the night was the first line production, as all 3 first liners for Washington accounted for the 3 stars of the game. Led by TJ Oshie, who had a power play goal and 2 assists, Nicholas Backstrom had a goal and an assist, and despite not scoring a goal, Alex Ovechkin added 2 assists on the night. As you can expect from a Peter Laviolette coached team, the defensemen joined the offensive production, with goals coming from John Carlson, who marked the beginning of his 2021 campaign for the Norris Trophy, which is the top defenseman in the league. Defensively, Brendan Dillon also added a goal. Rounding out the offense, Jacob Vrana had a nice goal on a turnover in front of the net, and Garnet Hathaway added an empty net goal at the end to seal the deal for Washington. It also isn't hockey without a fight.
McCabe and Dillon.
Wow, that's a good one.
Dillon going uppercuts. Landed one right on the chops there late in that fight. Brendan Dillon gets the decision over McCabe.
Defensively, goaltender Ilya Samsonov only made 22 saves on 26 shots, but to give him a little bit of credit, the first one came on a Sabres power play in which they moved the puck really nicely, and the last one came at the end of the game when Buffalo pulled their goaltender for an extra attacker. Other than the sloppy play, which can be expected for teams that really only had 2 weeks of training camp and didn't play any preseason games, what I didn't like were 2 bad penalties from fourth line center Nick Dowd. The first one was a holding penalty that led to Buffalo's power play goal in the opening period, and the second one was this nasty hit to Buffalo's Eric Staal. The play was only given a 2-minute minor for an illegal check, but it's a hit to the head, which should have warranted more and will probably warrant a look from the NHL's Department of Player Safety. So Nick Dowd likely has a suspension coming up. Next up for Washington, they'll do it again against Buffalo tonight at 7 p.m. Last but not least, let's take a look at Monday's College Football National Championship, which Alabama won 52-24. I predicted the score would be 28-25, so not that bad, right? Ohio State scored 1 less point, and Alabama nearly doubled what I predicted them to score. As for some first-round talents, which may or may not be available for Washington and the Baltimore Ravens, I just wanted to do my due diligence nonetheless. Wide receiver Dante Smith and 2020 Heisman winner went for 12 catches, 215 yards, and 3 touchdowns in just over one half of play, exiting the game early in the third quarter with some broken fingers. Wide receiver Jalen Waddle had 3 catches and 34 yards, playing after breaking his ankle just 11 weeks ago. He was projected as a first-round talent, but with the injury and, not looking at his healthiest and maybe potentially worsening that injury, he might slip a little bit out of the first round. So that's a guy to take a look at, as both Washington and Baltimore need some receivers. Some mock drafts have had Washington taking Alabama quarterback Mack Jones in the first round. Still, I don't think Washington should take a quarterback, but nonetheless, he did have a really good game, completing 36 passes on 45 attempts, going for 464 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he did lose a fumble. However, he did end the season with a 95.8 player rating, which is the highest out of a quarterback since 2014. Running back Naji Harris, who may or may not be a first-round pick, neither Washington or Baltimore really need a running back, did finish with 22 carries, 79 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also had 79 yards through the air, with a touchdown on just 7 catches. 2 offensive linemen out of Alabama that Washington and Ravens fans should take a look at are offensive tackle Alex Leatherwood and center Landon Dickerson. Dickerson did blow out his knee in Alabama's conference championship game, so he'll likely slide out of the first round, but he was the nation's top center, so he does warrant taking a look at. On the defensive line, Christian Barmore had a sack and 2 tackles for loss, so that's somebody that the Ravens should take a look at. And a cornerback from Alabama who will likely go in the first round, Patrick Surtain II. He had a pass breakup and a tackle for loss. So if he's available at 19 for Washington, that should be somebody they possibly take a look at. As for some Ohio State players, wide receiver Chris Olave had 8 catches for 69 yards. If he's available at 19 for Washington, that's a potential pick, though I think they should go with offensive line. Quarterback Justin Fields, he had a decent day, 17 completions on 33 yards, 194 yards, and a touchdown, playing through that hip pointer, which he suffered against Clemson. And cornerback Shaun Wade, he had a rough day, absolutely torched by Dante Smith after pretty much calling for him. He did have a pass breakup and a tackle for loss. It probably won't hurt his first round stock, but nonetheless, he didn't have a great day. A guard that both Washington and the Baltimore Ravens should keep their eye on is Wyatt Davis. He only allowed 2 sacks in 666 snaps over the past 2 seasons, so he is one of the best guards in the league. Guards in the nation in college football, and should probably be a top pick in the NFL draft. Another first-round talent, defensive end Tyreke Smith, did not play, likely due to COVID, as Ohio State had a few players missing due to illness. And the last player to look at for Ohio State, offensive tackle Thayer Munford. He's probably not a first-round talent due to some struggles with technique, but his athletic ability might see people buy high on him, so he is somebody to look at in the first round potentially. That's all I have for this episode. Thank you everybody for tuning in. God bless.